that was my first question. How did you first meet and fall in love? That's kind of a big, broad question. Like, was it love at first sight? Was it a gradual process? You know, I just, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing.
Sure. When I decided to go to Thomas Aquinas College and told friends of my family in Austria that this is what I would be doing, they told me that a young woman by the name of Susan Burnham was going to be going there and that I should look her up.
Really? How did your family in Austria know about Susie?
They, through Dietrich von Hildebrand, my parents have close friends in Salzburg through Dietrich von Hildebrand, who were close friends with Austrian emigres who emigrated to Tucson, Arizona, where Susie's family live. And they had become friends with her family. So it was the friendships of families that stood behind that. So I was primed. And I remember arriving at Thomas Aquinas College and looking around. Now, which one is she?
Right.
Is it this? Is it this? No, it turned out in each case not to be the one, because she, in fact, her parents asked her to go to Thomas Aquinas College a year later. But a year later, there was a party at the Grimm family home. They have 16 children and
oh my goodness,
amazing choir.
Wow.
It's a fantastic evening with Renaissance madrigals that they sang. It was chanting. And walking across the living room, large living room, was a young woman. And I knew from the way she looked at me that she knew who I was, which then made me realize that's the one. She's the one.
Wow.
So
that's something.
That, and then that scene is before my eyes, very present. I haven't forgotten that in the least.
How about that?
So that's the beginning. Maybe you can take it from there, Susie.
And we immediately began to talk, and we began to eat lunch and dinner together with another friend of Michael's, who was a young woman from Salzburg who had come because of his recommendation. So we took walks together, we sat together at meals and at the Friday night lectures. We were a threesome.
All right.
Until Advent. At Advent, everyone picks a name out of a hat for someone that they're going to be the Kris Kringle to.
Oh, right,
So
sure.
I got very interesting typed notes with messages, including one with a little music box that said, "Here are a few mangled bits of Mozart, because music is perhaps even more bread for the soul than philosophy." So I thought, could anyone but Michael have written that? Anyway, at the end of Advent, at the Christmas party, under the Christmas tree, very pretty Christmas party, there was a present from the Kris Kringle, and that revealed that it was Michael. And then he taught me how to waltz. And the waltz was really the icebreaker. After that, it was a twosome and not a threesome anymore.
Oh, how about that? After you began
But
waltzing together.
I thought, I thought, I love him. He loves me. He's serious about his faith. He goes to mass every day. His family is Catholic. There's 6 children in the family. He already knows what he wants to do. He wants to be a professor and have a big family.
Yeah.
He is a reasonable person to get married. And I thought, great, that problem is solved. Of course, it was, we're friends for 4 years before we got married, because I was a freshman at that point.
Oh, right. So you both decided that you'd wait until you graduated.
I thought that he was everything that I could want.
Wow, how about that? That is wonderful. And when did he propose, or when did you decide you were going to get married? Definitely.
He waited way too long for that.
Oh, yeah.
At the beginning of my junior year, he said, well, I hope we can get engaged this year.
Oh,
And I kept
nice.
wondering, is he going to ask at Christmas? Is he going to ask at Easter? Is he going to ask at graduation? But then he graduated, went back to Austria, and he invited me to come visit his family. And I said,
Right.
oh, that's a really long way and a very expensive trip to go visit someone you're not engaged to. But he did not pick up that. So I went
Really?
to
Oh,
visit his
wow.
family, and he asked me to go on a retreat and pray about our future. And during that retreat, he asked me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Part of the problem, I think, was a problem that many young men seem to fall into, and that is, if they're serious about a possible vocation to the priesthood, the idea of vocation can be misunderstood as being a clear word from God that relieves you of the need to make a decision.
Right.
And eventually what helped me was a conversation with a friend who said, look, this is a matter in the end of decision. Decision is part of the whole process of a vocation. Part of the process of vocation is also whether the other person says yes. So if I propose marriage to her and she says no, then I can't say, well, I have a vocation to get married to you. So you have to do God's will. So that was a trap that I got caught in, which was part of the reason for the length of.
Or you actually asked her to get engaged.
Get married to me, yeah.
Right.
When we got married we were very much in love, and we got married we were together at a retreat that Susie mentioned, and during that retreat we talked.
That was in Austria.
In Austria.
Okay.
And she didn't know German, so I translated into her ear, and there were many other expressions of love, naturally, that flow from being very much in love. And the retreat master got word from a priest who was there with a number of seminarians. Tell them not to be so lovey-dovey. They're confusing our seminarians. So we were scared.
That's funny. That's good.
So eventually, to talk it over, we decided, well, we have to leave the house, the retreat house. So we walked away quite a distance to a farmhouse, beautiful in the moonshine. And there was a espalier tree, a fruit tree trained up on the front of the house, and a bench underneath. Perfect. So we sat down, and a car drove up with the priest and the seminarians.
Oh my gosh. Incredible.
It was a bit of an obstacle course, but eventually,
wow,
that the proposal was made and accepted. On the Kris Kringle, there's a detail that Susie only found out. The Kris Kringle was a fairly important item in our courtship. She only found out many years, but 3 decades afterwards.
30 years later, I found out that he had not picked my name, but he had switched my name with someone else.
I was
standing
next to somebody.
And I said, I thought it was from God. And
well,
he said, God uses secondary causes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's great.
But I would like to talk about a Austrian custom that I thought was very beautiful, which is that they have like a baptismal candle. They have a marriage candle on the altar at the wedding, and they light it when you say your vows.
Beautiful.
And we had this beautiful wedding candle, and we brought it with us, and we lit it on the table next to bed in which we were to consummate our marriage. And we prayed for faithfulness and for children. And I just was so filled with gratitude to the church for making it possible for us to have a real marriage, that we were supported by our parents and the community of Thomas Aquinas College and by the teaching of the church to be chaste, so that this could be truly a giving of ourselves without having frittered ourselves away before, and that it could be the sign of our faithfulness till death, that by this act we would solidify our vows so that we would be married for life, and also that it could be the beginning of children that would be ours together. And I was just overwhelmed by the beauty and the greatness of this gift that
Yes,
the church gave us, and the candle was a sign of. So I think although we hadn't read Theology of the Body, we had been given the gift of great reverence for each other and for the marital act, and how meaningful it was. And I saw that the people who have civil marriages or get married in Protestant churches, they don't often really get married because they don't mean faithfulness for life. They have the door open for divorce even as they say those vows.
Yeah, what a tragedy that is.
and
Beautiful. Thank you, Susie, for sharing that. That is beautiful.
I'm going to second that very often the indissolubility of marriage is perceived as a limit, and it comes into operation when there's trouble. At least that's the way many people think about it. Whereas Susie is quite right. It is in the first place something positive that makes a total gift of self possible.
Yes.
That you really take all of your life in your hands at that moment and hand it over as a whole. And then there's an immense beauty in that.
Yep. And you also make yourself very vulnerable at the same time to that other person.
Right.
Well, thank you. Boy, I think you answered super abundantly that first question there.
The other thing about indissolubility, I also experienced it as a gift when we had difficulties. So we had a time when Michael was studying in Rome, and I was at home with first 1, then 2, then 3 little children in tiny, awful apartments, all alone all day in a foreign country with no family or friends around. I was not very happy. But you know, I prayed the rosary every day for faithfulness, and I experienced indissolubility as a gift because I knew that we had no option but to make this work, and that God would give us the grace to get through this tunnel into a new and better place. And indeed, that's what happened. But so even in a time of what was really difficult for me, probably more difficult than the time when we lost a baby who was 40 years old, and then a year later we lost another baby. The time in Rome was the hardest of all. But I still thought of indissolubility as a gift.
A gift to sustain you through those difficult moments.
To know that God's grace was going to get us through it. God wanted us to get through it, that we had promised to get through it, and he would give us the grace to get through it.
And since then, that is at the time, I was surprised that we had been so much in love that suddenly feelings of irritation and of anger swamped in, and it was a big surprise. Since then, I've come to know that something of this sort happens in most marriages. And in a way, it's like the rhythm of the spiritual life that many of the spiritual masters talk about, that is an occasional period of dryness or desolation has, in fact, can have an important role if one doesn't give up
Yeah.
by deepening
Right.
love, and then a spring comes afterwards that's better than the spring that was there before.
That's beautiful. The dark night of the soul that leads to a new level of unity.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can say after 43 years of marriage,
43 years. Congratulations.
there is so much peace in knowing that your beloved spouse has been faithful to you all this time, knows all the worst that could be known of you, and still loves you faithfully. And we're
Sure
separated for a week.
All the worst about me that's to be known.
For instance, this week we're separated because I'm staying with our daughter in Omaha. But
Right.
when we're reunited, it's so much deeper and better than a honeymoon, because there's this weight of love and trust behind it that makes it so
Right.
beautiful.
And in fact, in the last year, what is it, almost 2 years, all of our children have gone. We are empty nesters, as they're
Oh,
called.
right.
But it's been an immensely beautiful time. It was the time of COVID, but to us, COVID was a circumstance aiding a second honeymoon, as it were.
How
We were
lucky.
isolated together.
Right. Look at that.
With our books.
Boy, that's amazing.
We were forced to spend all our time together, and there was no one we wanted more to spend time with.
Wow, that is just what true love can do. Boy, that's just amazing.
Of course, it's also nice that I've also studied, so we share this
Right, a lot of
theology and philosophy too.
Right. Oh, for sure. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, for many couples, if the husband's job is not something the wife can participate in,
right,
the relation with the children falls mainly on the wife. Then when the children disappear, there's a vacuum. I'm sure something can be done with God's grace, even in those circumstances, but it was easy for us.
Wow. Did you homeschool any of your children?
We homeschooled all of them.
All of them. Oh, did you? Oh, nice. And how many?
There are 8 children, and the first one we homeschooled from 2nd grade up to high school, but the others we homeschooled the whole time up to college.
University.
And what made you?
A few months in Germany so that they would get an exposure to German.
And what made you decide, make that decision that you wanted to homeschool your children?
We wanted to spend more time with them. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, right. Oh, good.
We had a talk with a friend, John Schmidt, who
there, young one.
is one of the grandchildren.
How are you? Oh, boy, she has a great smile.
John Schmidt of Trivium School in Massachusetts. And he talked to us about and in a way I had known that. It's interesting, in the Summa, St. Thomas says that sexual union between man and woman is for the procreation and education.
Right, of children. Yeah.
One could wonder, well, gee, how can the expression of love between man and woman, the sexual expression of love, be educative for the children? There's not witnesses to it, but in fact, the love between husband and wife, it creates a space. Children are sheltered, and so it makes sense in those terms. And he said that many parents lose contact with their children in adolescence. That a point comes when they find they live in different worlds, they speak different language, they can't relate to each other. And having children and then losing them that way is immensely painful. So that was one of the main reasons for doing homeschooling. And for me, my participation in homeschooling was, this is another thing John Schmidt suggested, don't have a TV. It gives you a lot of time. So in the evenings, I used to read for hours, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Oh my
books.
goodness.
And at least 1 hour every night.
Wow, that is wonderful.
After dinner.
With the children.
A common world of language, of images, and so on.
Right.
So she carried the main burden of
homeschooling while you were at work as a professor.
She did an amazing job, except for spelling.
Except for spelling?
Okay. Most of our children cannot spell.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. Not everyone can do everything. They do a lot, that's for sure. Well, that is wonderful. And then, so you have 8 children and you said you lost 2 children. I'm really sorry to hear that.
The oldest is 41, the youngest is
he's
21. So the 20 years that separate them, and the spacing is pretty regular, but there are these 2 holes.
Okay, wonderful.
I would like to say something more about the homeschooling, that
yes,
we wanted to spend more time with them, more of our life with them.
yes.
So our first one did go to 1st grade, and we had to get him up, get him dressed in his uniform because he was going to a parish school, make his lunch, make sure there were 2 napkins in there, a cloth one to put on his lap and a paper one, and make sure he had his homework. And then he went to school where he had to sit still for an awful lot of time, maybe 5 hours with only a half an hour time for recess. And then he came home and he was just bottled up.
Right.
And it had, and so he needed to run around outside, but then he had to have dinner and do his homework. He still had to do homework and then go to bed early so he could get up early to go to school. And I realized that the most important part of our life as a family was meeting Michael at 5:15 Mass, and the children would sit on his lap, and then we'd have dinner together, and then he would read to them, and we would pray together and put them to bed. And everything had to be pushed together to make room for school. And I realized that was ridiculous, that I could teach what they taught in 5.5 hours, I could teach in an hour and a half. And he could run around all he wanted, and we could still go to Mass and spend time with Michael in the evening.
Wonderful. And so after the first child, you knew that was the formula for all the rest.
And then he told the other children, obey your mother. You have no idea how much better it is to have school at home than to go to school.
He was tough to homeschool. He often didn't obey. So,
right.
But he made everyone else obey me.
Okay. Nice. And maybe just moving on a little bit, how and when did you first discover theology of the body? Just to kind of bring that into the picture here a little more directly.
When I grew up in Salzburg, my parents were friends with Dietrich von Hildebrand. And in Dietrich von Hildebrand's writings, and he gave talks to young people in Salzburg. There, for the first time, I heard many things that are parallel to theology of the body. Although there are some problems in Hildebrand, the importance of procreation in marriage is not something that he is as clear about as he could be. Then when I studied philosophy before doing scripture, my father advised me to study philosophy before doing scripture because so much of fundamental decisions you make in reading a text are philosophical. So I went to the University of Dallas, where students of Hildebrand were teaching: Joseph Seifert, John Crosby, Damien Federica.
Right, I had all 3 of them for classes.
Oh, you did?
I did, yep. I had Dr. Crosby for my metaphysics class,
Wow.
Federica for my ethics class. We used Von Hildebrand's work. And then Dr. Seifert, no, I didn't have Dr. Seifert. He was the only one I didn't have because they left when I was a student there and formed that International Institute, or what the exact name, I don't remember, of philosophy that started out in Irving.
One of the things we read in that program was The Acting Person, which had just come out.
Did you? Oh, wow. And now they have a new English translation.
Absolutely forbiddingly difficult. Yeah.
Really.
English Ignatics translation is marvelous. Yeah. The new
Ignatic, yeah.
But Theology of the Body, when we went to Rome after the doctorate in philosophy at the University of Dallas, I went to Rome. We went to Rome and studied at the Biblicum. Yep. We went to some of the Wednesday audiences, which were at that point Theology of the Body.
Now, what year would that have been, more or less?
So we were in Rome from 81 to 84.
Okay, and he started them in 78, right?
Right.
No.
79.
79, sorry, 79.
Is that right? I forget now exactly.
But yeah, it's 79. It's 79, yeah.
Yeah. For 5 years. It took 5 years with the 1 year for the Holy Year.
Holy Year, yeah.
Where he didn't do Theology of the Body. And I was fascinated, but couldn't make terribly much sense of what he was saying. But then, after doing the Doctrine of the New Testament at Harvard, my first job was at Notre Dame. And after I got tenure at Notre Dame, Colonel Schönborn invited us to go to Austria for me to help build up what was essentially a session of the John Paul II Institute in Austria, although it wasn't called that. It was called the International Theological Institute for Studies on Marriage and the Family. So then I began studying the theology of the body. And every June, I went down to Rome to the meeting of all the vice presidents of the John Paul II Institute. And I remember Livio Melina saying at a certain point, Livio Melina, a man whom I respect hugely.
Oh, he's a great, I had him for a class on Evangelium Vitae right after it came out. He's just magnificent.
Yeah. He said, well, this text, Theology of the Body, really is our main object of research. And I said, oh, okay. I took his word for it. And so I decided at that then and there to write a book about the theology of the body. I'd been teaching it at in Gaming at the International Theological Institute, but then I began to work on it systematically. Then I saw, comparing the Italian and the English, that there were big translation problems.
Yeah.
So I began translating this piece of text and that piece of text for my book, but then eventually decided, well, I might as well do the whole thing. And got in touch with the Daughters of St. Paul, and so I did the translation.
Oh, the 2006 text came.
That I started that many years ago, decades ago, is just finished now. And it's
Glory of the Logos in the flesh. I have it right here on my shelf behind me. Yeah, absolutely.
It's big enough to kill a dog with, but
so wonderful. Okay, and Susie, were you with Dr. Waldstein on that journey into theology of the body as well?
He taught it. Yeah.
I was.
Okay.
I taught it also.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
And I think what has struck me
tell about your doctorate in theology. Sorry, go ahead.
Is the Trinitarian aspect that, okay, God, who is love, made us out of love for love, the mystery of creation, but God, who is love, as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit loving each other, placed that impress on man partly by making them man and woman, so that they could image him not only in having reason and will, but by being a communion of persons. and that in the spousal act, they make visible, they transform into the visible world this communion of persons. I find that very beautiful, and it deepens my understanding of the marital act. That it's, I never had any problem in seeing that the procreative had to be united to the unitive, because it doesn't seem to me that you love someone if you say, I love you, but I don't want you to be the father of my child, or I love you and I don't want you to be the mother of my child. So I could always see that connection, but this imaging of the Trinity deepened this understanding of the marital act, and all that he talks about, reverence and piety for the other person, that you give yourself to this other person, understanding them as another person standing before God, and that together, in giving each to the other, you are imaging the love at the heart of the Trinity. I find that very beautiful.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I never thought in that sense, husband and wife are like the bridge between the invisible and the visible world in that conjugal act.
When I began working on theology of the body, and of course that theme is such a major theme, a friend and former teacher, whose name I won't mention, a very committed Thomist, said to me about exactly the thing that Susie was just been talking about. Don't go down that path. It leads nowhere.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Stick in Trinitarian theology with the account given by St. Augustine and St. Thomas about the proceeding inner word and proceeding inner love. So an analogy taken from within one human person, the one human mind, and they are very hesitant to see in the multiplicity of human beings and their communion of love an image of the Trinity. St. Thomas never explicitly calls it an image of the Trinity. There are some fathers of the church, for example, Cyril of Alexandria, who says that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't know
So
that.
one of the main tasks of the book that I wrote, Glory of the Logos in the Flesh, was to counter that objection against John Paul's theology of the body, and to argue that in fact there is agreement between St. Thomas and John Paul on that, even though St. Thomas never says the kind of thing that Susie said. What he does say amounts to the same thing. Plus, I argued that if you limit Trinitarian theology to the Augustinian account of the proceeding inner word, it's a reduction of the mystery of the Trinity to the natural order, because it's a philosophical argument that Augustine uses, and St. Thomas understands it as philosophical. It's not an expression of the mystery of faith.
I'm afraid I need to leave.
Okay.
Maybe I'll say just one more thing before I go, if that's all right. I have my family calling me.
Sure, Susie. Thank you so much.
Just this image of the Trinity and the communion of love. I can't understand how that could not be enriching, just as the image of Christ, the bridegroom, loving the church as his bride is inspirational and has to be. If a man takes that seriously, he's supposed to lay down his life for his wife. To imagine that our union is supposed to image the communion of the Trinity, and we should love our children as the persons of the Trinity love each other. That just seems to me it must be the most enriching and beautiful, inspiring thought. Anyway,
Absolutely.
great to talk to you. See you
Thank you,
tomorrow,
Susie.
Michael, darling.
Yes, sweetheart.
Bye
All
bye.
right. God bless. See you, Susie. Thank you so much, eh? That
You're
was
welcome.
wonderful. That was wonderful. Oh,
Great. Bye bye.
could have been better. Yeah. Wow. Well, Susie and you kind of answered those major questions. So, okay, so let me just see here. How would you, well, like, what have been some of the most beautiful and joyful moments of your marriage? I mean, you've kind of talked about that.
Yeah,
I
well,
suppose.
of course,
Laughter.
the honeymoon was fantastic. We went to Socorro National Park, rented a cabin there, and it was very immensely peaceful. It was, as I think back, it was a time of immense joy and peace.
Hmm.
Difficult times followed, but I wouldn't
They're in
say,
Rome, right? When you went to Rome.
yeah, when we went to Rome, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
say that the honeymoon was the best time of it. It grew in depth.
Right, like Susie was saying, yeah.
Yeah. So now it is kind of an Indian summer. We're getting old, but so the fall and the winter of life is approaching, but these past 2 years have been an Indian summer, a warm period
Beautiful.
like in spring. But
Wonderful, Dr. Waldstein. And I mean, you kind of did this already. How would you describe the gift your children have been in your lives? I mean, you were talking about that. You wanted to spend even more time with them in homeschooling and everything. And
yeah, I remember the birth of the first child, completely unexpected, was a new, it was like the opening of a door in a wall and a new landscape behind it, and a rush of emotion that I had not experienced before. It was like falling in love for the first time. Unheard of, and I was mature at that point, so I was really aware of it. An unsuspected intensity of attachment to this particular child that it was up to us to take care of him.
Beautiful.
It's quite amazing.
Thank you, Dr. Waldstein. That says it all. And you kind of talked already about the difficult or challenging moments in your marriage, in your lives. Okay.
Yes, and they were very hard, but looking back, and there was fault in it. I wasn't sensitive enough to what Susie was going through, and that created a good amount of anger in her and kind of responding anger in me. So there was fault there, certainly on my part, but nevertheless, staying through that winter, and it was not a Florida winter, but a Siberian winter, staying through that winter led to a time that was more beautiful than before.
Perfect. That is great advice for the young people. And what sustained you through them? Susie talked about that. Your marriage vows, the indissolubility. Would you
The
add
marriage
anything
vows
to
and
Yeah.
the children.
that? The children, your practice of the sacraments, I suppose, your prayer life.
Right. So all of that helped. And on a certain level, love between us remained, even though it was overlaid by what pushed itself into the foreground, namely this irritation and anger. But the anger, yeah, overlaid something that remained.
Right. Oh, for sure. That love, there was that commitment of your whole lives. Okay. And maybe here one that would just help out some young people. How has the practice of natural family planning affected your married love? I don't know if you wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Practice natural family planning, particularly after one of our children died. He had a heart problem, and they introduced a catheter into his heart to fix it and introduced an infection. So after 4 days, the baby died, which was immensely difficult for us.
Which child was that? How many children did you have when?
See, that was Johannes Maria Thomas, the 4th. It would have been the 4th child. I'm sorry, what was the context of the question?
How has natural family planning affected
Natural
you?
family planning. So after that, Susie really felt she needed a break.
Right.
Having a child soon again was just too much for her. She was so old and cut to the bone that we practiced natural family planning. For a man, I think, well, sexual desire is very strong. So natural family planning isn't easy. It's also not a hugely difficult thing. That needs to be said. You don't have to be a moral super athlete to practice it. It's quite possible if the two are committed to it, to do it. It's by no means impossible. Many people portray it as if it were climbing Mount Everest, but it isn't.
Right. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
It's not the death
Perspective,
sentence.
and I think that will help young people too to embrace it.
But one tendency of men is for the expression of love to narrow itself to the sexual, and for other ways of expressing love and tenderness, other ways tend to wither away. That seems to be in the male emotional makeup. There's much less integration than in women. Women have a breadth of emotional makeup where sexual resonates deeply across a whole breadth of
emotions of the person, the spirit, etc. Yeah.
And I think the practice of natural family planning for a man helps the man to broaden emotionally and to express love in ways other than sex.
Beautiful.
And that's very important for the relation.
Yep, especially for the woman, because she perceives that love in all those other acts of tenderness, etc. And otherwise, sometimes she might even feel like she's being used if the man just expresses it sexually.
Yeah, because men are monomaniacs.
But yeah, yep, wonderful. And then we're just near the end. Do you have a couple more minutes, Dr. Waldstein, or you have just a couple more? What advice would you give to young engaged couples for their present relationship and their future marriage? I mean, a lot of what you've been saying is already advice that they can grab onto and live, but anything specific?
Use the time of courtship, but be pure in that time. That is, don't engage in sexual acts.
Mm-hmm.
It is a precious time of maturation. Even if at the beginning of the honeymoon, it takes a while to come to know each other, and it's not by any means, as it were, perfect, the sexual relation. It takes a while to grow, but to anticipate the total gift of self before you're able to proclaim it publicly, make it publicly in a liturgical setting, to anticipate it is in some way not taking serious that you're a member of a larger body and that marriage is not simply a private affair. It is intensely private, but not only. It's something that takes place in the great body of Christ. And so if the church says a public ceremony is needed, then that makes sense. If you're in Siberia, dropped off by Stalin in one of those train loads of Greek Catholics that he sent to Siberia, of course, then a marriage begins with either with the words, I'm yours, you're mine, or with doing it sexually in the body. So that's a different circumstance. But being serious as a member of the church, of a larger body, is an important factor. Yeah.
Great. And then the last one, kind of a big one, but you can answer it succinctly. How do you view the role theology of the body is called to play in transforming marriage and family life and in helping to transform culture?
The great thing about the theology of the body is it's positive.
Yes.
So much of traditional Catholic sexual ethics has been concentrating on don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. It's understandable because the sexual passion is overwhelmingly great. It's like riding a very spirited horse. It can throw you, so it's easy to be afraid. And if you're afraid, then negativity comes in. So it's understandable. But in the end, it tends toward a negative view of sexuality in general. Many of the students, Catholic students, who grew up in good Catholic homes, are struck reading the theology of the body by the negativity with which they grew up. So I think this is one of the great things about theology of the body, that it shows you the beauty of the relation between man and woman, and with sensitivity to the experience of men and women, you can actually verify what the theology of the body says by reflecting on your own experience. Does it resonate? And it resonates deeply with human experience. So yeah. I think that's the pastoral method of the theology of the body, the combination of the beauty, that is the positive approach, combined with experience. It's a very strong method.
The Pope appeals to the couple's own experience. Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Well, that's everything I had, Dr. Waldstein, and I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yes, well, one thing I wanted to add, you're free to use this as you like.
Really?
So
wow.
For example, if you want to edit it